First of all, thank you so much, Alex, the entire La Suprema team for having me. I've loved you guys from afar for a long time, and now I get to join you from afar to talk storytelling. Even though a lot of my background with storytelling work is actually in San Francisco, and that's what came up there, I actually am located in Tucson, and I love their space. So anybody locally, definitely check that out. So I want to first and foremost just honor that there are a number of you here who have joined live, which I know now we're all like zoomed out, webinared out. So the fact that you have taken the time during your work days to join us live, I just want to honor that virtually, wherever you're at in the space. I'd love it if people popped in and shared where they are coming from, because I know that there's folks from all over. And I just, we're going to get into some really practical things of like how to tell your story, how to this, potentially some feelings like there's the right and the wrong way to do things. And there's ways in which you can be engaging or not engaging to your audience. And I just want to say that if you're here today, we are all already living a story. Your story is valuable. It matters. There's no, you don't need to have, summited Mount Everest for your story to be valuable. If you woke up this morning and are living through things, whatever you're living through, just 2020, the fact that you've made it through 2020, you have a story to tell, right? As well as, other things. Many of us are dealing with loss or grief, or maybe new love, or, new kids on the way, or kids that you wish weren't around because they're driving you crazy this morning. We are living stories every moment. And I just want to affirm that as we go into this idea of choosing stories to tell. So I'm going to pop over to the chat, but I don't want it to be too distracting. Hi, everybody. I love all the love. Oh, hi, Sam, Chrissy, Sabrina. Oh, some names I don't even know. Bethany up in Phoenix. I love you too. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get started. And okay, so I've already, come on. There we go. Everybody you can see my screen? Cool. So like Alex mentioned, my name is Darian. I really specialize in helping mostly entrepreneurs, but really professionals that are really driven by their purpose in the work that they do. So they have a personal connection to the work they're doing. And I help people fuse more of their personal story into how they present themselves professionally, with the goal being to be more engaging and to create a deeper connection with your audience. Obviously, in a dream world, I love to have these as workshops in person. So we'll see how this goes in the virtual space. But this is a little bit about what I do. And I want to hear from you now. What are your top challenges? When you heard of this workshop and you said, learn how to tell your story, what comes to mind? What is some things you want to learn today? What are the top challenges you have? If you sit down with somebody in the beginning of a meeting, networking, coffee date, whatever, and somebody says to you, so tell me about yourself. Tell me your story. What are some of the things that make your heart start to palpitate when that question comes up? And I think, can I see the chat box while I'm sharing? Let's see here.
It's a little challenging, so I'm happy to read them to you. Yeah. So one person said how to make it relatable and applicable when I'm sharing. Yeah, how to make it relatable to the situation. Wow, almost the same answer. For me, I'm like, where do I begin?
First end, really, to challenge.
Yeah,
how much is too much?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some other thoughts people have?
What else, everyone? Telling my story in a condensed form and relating to what I'm currently doing.
Okay. Currently, I suspect that Sabrina is a multi-passionate entrepreneur. That is definitely a challenge, especially those of you who have a lot of things going on. Maybe you've had a lot of businesses, a lot of passions. I feel for you because you guys need to make some choices on what all you share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She said yes. Yeah. People are relating to that for sure. So learning to leave out some of the little details that might not be as important to the whole story. How to make a very diverse background make sense, and bridge a period of unemployment. Totally.
Ooh, that's real.
Yeah. And just make it condensed and tying it all together. Yeah. Brief and relatable. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think if I could sum up what I've heard, and I'll share a little bit more about my story and how I got into this work, but I would say there's 3 buckets. There's the where do I even begin? I could go this route. There's so many things I could choose from. How do I pick? There's the oh God, when I start rambling. And definitely the there's a desire to want to create this like through line where like all your story sort of is like in this neat line where you never have a break, you never this, like what, you know, kind of like this dream world in which you knew what you were doing, what you were supposed to be when you were like 12 years old. And then your whole life just makes sense ever since. And spoiler alert, like nobody's life makes sense like that. I've heard so many stories. I've helped so many people prepare for pitch meetings, interviews. Nobody knew what they were doing. And frankly, the people who knew what they were supposed to be doing, like I worry about them because, you know, life's interesting. You got to keep it interesting. Okay. Why am I, oh, there we go. So my story, so you've heard a little bit about my bio. This picture to the left that you see was when I worked at the city of Phoenix. So yeah, my degree, my formal training, let's just say, was in urban planning. I worked in community economic development. At the time that storytelling came into my life, I was just checking into these cubicles, you know, hanging out by the printer, as you can see here, wearing black suits in the Phoenix heat. I don't know what I was thinking. I, you know, edited out my lovely coworker because he maybe didn't want to be a part of this webinar. But really, like my days just spent going into like an elevator, going to the 20th floor, pushing papers around, not having a lot of autonomy over what I said, what I thought, like the way I presented myself. And some of my friends at the time were doing this thing called storytelling. And I was like, it resonated for me. And I went to shows for about a year. And there was this sense that like, I just knew that there was something about it that was pulling me in, but I was shy for a very long time to do that. And what you see here in the middle is a picture from one of my very first open mics. It was just in a backyard in Phoenix, downtown Phoenix, skyline in the background. I don't remember what the story was about. It was silly. I got up and there was something in me that just shifted in many ways. One, it was thrilling to be on stage, to have the mic. I'm absolutely a performer. And at the time, I didn't really own that. I thought that there was something bad about taking up space or talking about yourself, or especially as a woman, we were always kind of thinking of like, well, I don't want to be too much of anything. And it was the first time that I was taking up space and people loved it. I got off stage, people wanted to hear more stories, they wanted to connect. I suddenly had this community. And I did this for, you know, about a year, sort of having this sort of day life of the party line, being this government bureaucratic type person, and then doing this really free space at night. And it worked for a bit until it didn't. And I realized that really my mission, my purpose in life was to create a space in which we could just honor that we don't actually have to split ourselves all day long. Like there's something dehumanizing about this process of having one voice all day and then going back to ourselves at night. And that didn't work for me at all as a human, as a professional. And so in early 2017, I did it. I, you know, did the whole dramatic quitting your 9 to 5, you know, very classic story of getting to a place where you're so burnt out at your job that you don't even care about the next steps. You're like, I'm going to do this. And so I, not only did I quit my job, I decided I was going to become a storytelling coach. I got rid of everything I owned and effectively lived out of my car, but I called it a road trip around the country. But I was couch surfing with friends for about 7 months. I lived with different friends, partly to figure out where I wanted to land with my next steps, but partly just to kind of create this really big break in my story. What I didn't have, and I'll get to the next slide here. What I didn't have is a freaking clue as to what this looked like as a business. I think many of us do this where we're very passion driven. You know, we kind of know this impact we want to make in the world, but we don't necessarily know what that looks like as a business. So what I did is I decided to move to San Francisco because I was like, there's a lot of other entrepreneurs here. A friend of mine had told me I should come to visit. I did. What you're seeing here is my very first workshop that I did as a storytelling coach. And I had, you know, I was working it out. I think the topic of this conversation was about like the science of storytelling. And I announced to the world, like, I'm a storytelling coach, but I didn't know what that meant in terms of a process. So I told this group of people that you're seeing right here that I was like, I'll work with anybody for free. Help me figure out my process. And what I got in return, and what we're going to be getting into today, is a common question where people say, well, I want to learn how to tell my story. And I'd go further. I'm like, well, what does that mean to tell your story? Like, to whom, to what end, to what part, like, you know, and they're like, well, I just, you know, I'm a really interesting person. I've done a lot of things. I think I want to start a business. Maybe I want to switch jobs. I don't really actually know what I'm doing, but I want to have my like personal brand story so that if I'm talking to influencers, if I'm talking to friends, if I'm talking to potential customers, I have my story. And I have to confess that I struggled with this idea of a single story, because what I was hearing and what people were clarifying is that they kind of wanted to take their whole life and to condense it into, like, say, a 3-minute pitch. And I think a lot of you who are saying, I want to be succinct, I want to, like, get to the heart of it. I think there's this desire that we all have to just, okay, I can come into a room and I just know I have my story, it's on lock, I can practice it, and I have this one story. But the problem I had with it, and I worked with one of these clients for some time. I didn't charge her. I was like, I need you to help me create a process so that I can help people tell their story, like this one beautiful personal brand story. And we worked out different little exercises, questions. We got somewhere. But I finally decided, like, I'm not doing this. What I am going to do instead is help people choose what I'm calling the right story, so that you don't have this singular story that you say no matter who, partly because that's really challenging, but mostly because it doesn't make sense to tell the same story to every person in every setting, in every meeting, no matter what, right? The audience matters, the purpose matters. And especially for those of you who work on a lot of different things, it matters what you're talking about. It does not serve the person you're talking to cover a bunch of things that might be interesting. In this person's case, she had talked about, like, I went to Burning Man and I lived overseas and I traveled here and I worked here and worked, da, da, da. And I went, well, does Burning Man have anything to do with, like, this startup that you've got? And she's like, no, but it's like a cool thing I did. And I was like, okay, well, maybe we like save it for like story 2, like maybe story 1 be like a little more focused on what you're doing and what you want that person to know about you in relation to your business. So the plan today is, you've already heard my story. We'll get into a little bit about what is a story. I think we're in this place where storytelling, like, it sounds amazing, right? Like, it has this beautiful, it reminds us of being kids and hearing stories. There's something about it that feels nice, but also sometimes we don't always know, like, what that looks like in practice. And I think that's where many of us struggle. Then I'll help us develop a framework for selecting the right story. And then I'm going to practice with Alex. Normally, I love to have these workshops be something where you guys actually craft it and then you can share with each other. I'm not going to do that to you in a lunchtime and create breakout rooms. I'm not going to do it to Alex. So I'm going to use her as my guinea pig and we'll actually walk through that. Yay. And we'll leave some time for a Q&A. Okay, Alex, I'm seeing some things going in the chat box. Will you interrupt me if it's something that I should jump in on?
Totally. So people are just really resonating with what you're saying. That's what's happening.
I'm getting some little amens.
There's a right story for different audiences. Yeah.
If I do nothing else today, I hope everybody walks away a little more relaxed. You know what I mean? Like, owning that you have a story, but also owning that you have like 500 stories, and have fun telling all of those stories rather than stressing yourself and your audience out telling one story that like touches on like a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
So before we get into the meat of it, I want to set out some ground rules. So I've already covered ground rule 1, which is there's no such thing as your story. Even though I just named this talk how to tell your story, I did that. It was a clickbait situation because I know that that's what everybody says. But my philosophy, you don't have to believe me, is I just really don't think it serves you to stress yourself out thinking you have your story. 2, it's okay to know something that your audience doesn't. This goes out especially to the very wonderful women such as myself who've done a lot of personal development work, a lot of therapy, a lot of Brene Brown videos, and we are oozing with self-awareness, and we want to tell people all of the things about ourselves because we have all the self-awareness. And trust that if you're meant to have a relationship with the person that you're talking to, there's time for all that to come out, right? My goal for you is to have a solid first like 3 minutes. So like the setting we're talking about here is if you've invited somebody out to like a coffee date or you're sitting down for a meeting, I want you to be as effective as possible in the first 2 to 3 minutes where you give people a sense of where you've been, where you're at, where you're going, and why you're sitting in front of that person at that moment. And then we can breathe and realize that there's a lot of interesting things about you that are not going to make the cut for this 2 minutes. You're still an interesting person. Your story is still awesome. And there's time for all of that to come out. The third is, I call this the truth will set you free. A lot of times, and this really relates to when we're talking and people are asking questions and then we start to stutter or ramble. My feeling is that a lot of the rambling comes from a reluctance to just tell the truth. And what I mean by that is, and this is a little bit more applicable maybe to job interviews or a sales pitch where you really want it to go well. You really want that person to say yes to whatever it is you're pitching them. And so they ask a question and your mind goes to this place where you go, what's the right answer? What do they want me to say right now? And so then you're starting to talk and then you're trying to read their mind and you're watching their body language and you're watching their eyes and you're trying to shape shift your words to match what you think they want to hear. And you're kind of losing them in the process. So I will just say, ask yourself at any moment, what is the truth? And what if you just said that, right? Even if it's not the most succinct, even if it's not the most perfect, tight sentence, it will feel differently in your own body. And as a result, it's going to feel differently in your audience's body because your voice really is, it's a musical instrument, right? And so if the sound is starting from this constricted, stressed out place, your audience is going to feel just like uncomfortable. They're going to feel that pressure of like, oh, like they're really coming on strong. I don't know. It's like, just tell the truth. And if y'all are meant to be together forever, it's going to happen, right? It's the same rules for like a date, right? So I'm seeing the chat box. I'm going to.
People are nodding their heads. They're
okay. All right.
Yeah. Samantha loves your voice as a musical instrument. I also, that's a really golden nugget going to take from this. So yeah, we're with you, Anna. Sorry.
I love this.
Yeah.
Such an amazing. Okay. So this is a true question that I'm throwing out to you all. So I will actually open the chat box now. So we've talked a lot about my point of view, my position, my preaching about storytelling. What is a story? I'm going to open up the chat now.
Yeah, Martha asked, is it okay to be writing a story while listening to this?
Martha, it is okay for you to be doing whatever you want to be doing right now. So yes, but I do have a worksheet that I'll be sharing for folks that we're not going to work through right now, but absolutely, write, dance, do what feels right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question. So what is a story if you were to define it? Oh, nice.
That's awesome.
No guess?
What's a story, y'all? What are we thinking? People are thinking. Just need a couple minutes.
What about you, Alex? What do you think a story is? We can tell who's the perfectionist in this room. All of you.
Yeah, we all are. It is a really great question. Stories are personal narratives. They're meaningful. I think they're meaningful in some way, right? Like hopefully they're meaningful to us as individuals and they help us relate with those around us. I think that's what we're trying to get at. Oh, here we go.
You can take on your listeners. I was literally writing personal narrative, beginning, middle, and end. I love it. The structured Samantha narrative from real life, a frame of yours. Okay. So we're all on the same page that it's something that happened. It's personal. An anecdote from perspective of something that matters to me. Yeah, and this idea of meaning is coming up a lot. I love that. What is? It's the stuff that keeps coming out of my mouth. Yeah. I come from a storyteller family. I love that, Martha. Relation of events, facts, experiences, tells them. Awesome. So if you can tell anything about me, I'm not a big fan of everything being right and wrong. So everything that everybody said is right. I will just, there we go. So one of my very first storytelling mentors, Liz Warren over at the Storytelling Institute in Phoenix, she would start off her workshops and just say, a story documents change. And she's like, if that's anything, like I'm done here. And she would kind of like mic drop and walk out. But effectively, that's what it is. I've heard a few people talk about the idea of a beginning, middle, and end. I love a good 3-act play. But effectively, what I like to think of a story is as I said here, a pivotal moment. So it's rather than entering your story thinking about like already the memoir of your whole life, start from a vantage point for your sanity above anything else on a pivotal moment, a moment that you can say, from this moment forward, everything changed, right? This sort of like, that's the climactic peak of your story. So this is where you start, I would say. And then from there, what makes it a story is it putting it into like a bookend of a beginning where there's some context of like, what was normal before? Like how did you think before? How did you live? What was life like before then what happened? And then the end is sort of the who are you now as a result of this happening. I'm focusing on personal narrative here, right? So it's this bookending of a before and after that hangs on a pivotal moment. And I'll get into what that looks like in terms of a networking situation. But for those of you, because I can tell in the room that not everybody's necessarily an entrepreneur who's preparing this for a pitch meeting, for those of you who are thinking more personal narrative, I encourage you to really focus on moments rather than the whole saga of who you are when you start to tell a story. Especially the beginning of the story can get very tricky when you start to think about like, what is the relevant context of the before. So the framework I like to give, I'm loving that the chat box is going. I know I'll distract myself by going over there, but I'm dying to know. Alex, you better send me the whole like chat.
You got it. I'll send it all to you. But just for some more positive reinforcement, Ryan said that he's been on both sides of the interview table. He's been guilty of rambling and he's witnessed it. So you are totally on point.
Listen, if my boss was here, he would be like, how is this girl teaching people not to ramble? Because I can go off on the tall tale and 20 minutes later, I'm like, what was I talking about again? We all do it, especially when we care and especially when it matters to us, right? So the framework I'd like to offer up here, and I might drop out of this so I can use my cursor at least to point. This is the trouble with virtual is you can't point at things. At least I can, but you can't tell what I'm pointing at. So my framework is that your story is an invitation to change. What I mean by that is that when you are sitting down, and we'll get into a real life context here with Alex here in a minute, but when you're sitting down in front of somebody and you're wanting to drop in a personal story in order to get your audience to do something, to take action after you're hearing your story, I like to offer the idea that it's an invitation for them to change their thinking and the way they see the world. And the way to do that, rather than hard pitching them, hard selling them, giving them a lecture, is to simply tell a true story of when you yourself became convinced of whatever it is, whatever Kool-Aid you're wanting them to drink. Tell the story of when you yourself drank that Kool-Aid. And so if you want a real quick example, it's what I did at the beginning of this presentation, right? The Kool-Aid I wanted you all to drink is to let go of the idea that you have a singular story, to release that pressure to, to smash your whole life story into one thing, and to accept a world in which you have multiple stories, and that's okay. And so the context that I gave for that, the kind of like the before, is how I used to feel really stressed about, helping people in this way, giving people this idea of how to tell your story framework. And then the pivotal moment was when I was like, F this doesn't work for me and it's not working for them. I'm not doing this. We're going a different route. And now I'm on the other side of it where I'm, I guess, trying to evangelize the world with it. I don't know. It's like my pitch then becomes, inviting people to accept it. You may not like it. You may still want to have like a especially like the memoirist or whatnot. If you go on tour then and you want to, it will become important for you to probably have like one story where you can just go on repeat with that. Okay. So this arc that you're looking at here is, I'm saying, loosely speaking, I'm going to come out of this. So loosely speaking, we're just going to assume that our audience is at the beginning of the story, meaning that they are untransformed, unchanged. So I blanketly assume that everybody who joined a webinar today to learn how to tell their story assumes that, that there's this perfect recipe for story. I assumed you were all here. So I have to take you almost like holding your hand and to walk you across all of the content, all of the life experience that I lived that brought me to this point, that changed everything, this moment where I said, F it. And now hopefully if I've convinced you well enough, I'm taking you along, and now, hopefully I've got you close to where I'm at here, which is I no longer believe that there's such a thing as your story, right? And then I'm inviting you to come along now on this journey to think differently. We'll get into a more specific business idea with Alex, but effectively it's it's that simple and it's that hard, right? Choosing what to say in these moments, because truthfully, there was a lot of different moments where I learned this lesson. She was this particular person I was talking, I didn't mean to start back over. Sorry about that. You know, this particular person who gave me her instructions to want to tell her story in one succinct way, she was one of many, right? It just was one that stood out to me, especially since she was talking about Burning Man. I'm going to pause a little bit. Feel free to drop in questions, but you know, you've got a worksheet. I will go ahead. Hopefully it's still saved in my page. Can I message everybody?
Yeah, you sure can if you select all panelists and attendees.
Okay, so here is a template you can use. I would encourage you not to take it out right now, and because we're going to work with Alex, and I think that will be a better way to kind of get a sense of it. If you do this worksheet where you craft your stories, and I have a set of questions here that you can follow to help to build out the story and tease it out so that you can have a better launch place. At the end of the worksheet, you'll see my email. And if you want to send me a rough draft, either written or audio of your story, I'm happy to give feedback. In a perfect world, I'd love it if we were all crafting right now and I can chime in. But that's kind of where we're going with, oh my goodness, sorry. So I'm not seeing questions coming through, but effectively here, was that a question?
Yeah, someone asked if we can grant access, and I was just going to let them know that you will eventually.
Yeah, so I didn't have it open to everybody. So you should be able to request access, and I will give everybody access. I didn't want it totally like open all over the internet. So yes, just go ahead and hit request, and I will give that to you. So effectively, if we're going to think about choosing your story as being like a step process, and this is all detailed in the worksheet. And so Alex, this is where you got to start paying attention, because this is what I'm going to be taking you through. Is step one is identifying the people, the setting, and the goal. So who are you talking to, in what context, and the goal, meaning like, what do you want them to think, feel, or do as a result of hearing your story, right? So the setting could be a job interview, the setting could be coffee date, setting could be a pitch meeting, it could be a workshop, right? You know, if those of you who are teachers, healers, all of these things, it's important to know who you're talking to and to what end. Like I've said, step two is what would you like them to think, feel, or do? And I just want to say that not everything has to be a hard pitch, right? I think there's times in our lives where we're in transition and we don't have a business fully fleshed out. We don't have a career line. You know, just the other day, I reached out to someone. I've been getting into like the filmmaking world, documentary film, and I don't have a pitch. I don't have anything I could sell anybody. I don't have an idea. I have nothing I could sell anybody right now. What I want is inspiration, and specifically inspiration from women. So I reached out to a woman, and in the subject line, I said, storyteller looking for inspiration. And I told a little bit about my storytelling background, what I liked about her work. And I just asked her, can I hear your story of how you got into this so I can be inspired? And she said, yes. We got on the phone, we talked. Not everything has to be this like, okay, now I'm going to, you know, I need to have this neat way that we're all going to collaborate. It's super clear what I'm asking for. Sometimes it's like, you want to be friends. But have a sense of what you want people to think, feel, or do, or maybe think, feel, and do as a result of hearing your story. And then, like I said, once you've identified the Kool-Aid you're wanting the other people to drink, then that's when you go back into your own life and go, okay, well, when did I think, feel, or do this? Like, when did my mindset shift to where I started to believe this myself? And then tell that story. So it's simple and it's not. Okay, I see the chat box going. Yes, can you grant us? Yeah. Okay, so we already got that one. Yeah. So with that introduction, feel free to pop in questions, but I will go ahead and stop sharing. And Alex is on the hot seat. So, and she has not been prepared for this. I feel like this is like a magician disclaimer where I'm like, I have not met her before.
I don't know the tricks.
Yeah, no, she does not know where I've hidden the coin. Yeah. Okay, So you and I had talked, and I did not know this about you, but you moonlight as a jewelry maker. Is this true?
Yeah, at least I used to. Yeah, I'm getting back into it again.
So let's start off just by, first and foremost, with whatever information you have, tell us a little bit about the concept of this business. What are you thinking with it? Like, what's with the information you have today? It's okay. I saw you already cringe. It's okay if you don't have a business plan.
No, we're good. It's good. It's good. So it's a business that actually initiated with going through my grandmother's old sewing buttons one day, and she let me keep a collection of her buttons that I really loved, and inspiration struck, and I started making bracelets for people with their personalities and their style and like unique characteristics in mind. And then I launched it as a business when I was an undergrad. So it's called Biddle Me This. My last name's Biddle. And it was, it was my job in undergrad. That's what I did. I quit my part-time job, and that's what I did, and created this business and loved it. And I really have kind of pivoted since, and found myself traveling quite a bit. And now that I'm back and I'm stable in Tucson, I'm really excited to get back into it again. So
I said stable in Tucson. I thought you said single, and I was like,
no, not single.
I was like, your fiance might not appreciate that. You're like, I'm single and I'm ready to make my jewelry.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, that was probably too personal. Okay. So let me, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the worksheet that you all have shared. So I'm going to model what it's going to look like for you. Okay. So hopefully everybody can see that. So I've got my little craft your story. So when you guys open it, the first instruction is to make a copy of this onto your own drive. So I'll be giving everybody viewing rights, and then you can make a copy. So what we know now is Alex, she's got this jewelry thing. It's got a few different lives to it. It has an origin story, and we'll get into more of that. Let's get to the boring stuff first. Where you're at today, so we are August 2020, who do you need to get in front of? And like, what is your number one networking goal right now? And if it's not like, if you're not hardworking on this business, that's fine. But let's just pretend that you have some goals right now. Who do you need to get in front of, and how?
Yeah, great. So this is a little hypothetical, but I'm going to dream big because that's what I like to do. So we're going to say I'm pitching this product and idea to one of my favorite designers, Justina Blakeney of the Jungalow. If anyone knows of the Jungalow, it's like an interior design.
I'm going to say of Jungalow.
Justina, that's her name.
Oh, Justina. Okay.
Yeah. So this is big. She's based out of LA, and I adore the work she does. So it'd be great to work with her someday. And
okay. So, and what are you pitching her right now?
I'm pitching her selling my bracelets.
Okay. So you want her, so you'd be making.
I want them to be on her website. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So put your.
And just so everyone knows, my fiance just texted me and said, "You are single?"
Oh no. See, we're living stories every moment. We just had
So he's tuning in somewhere.
Pivotal moment, that awkward moment where Alex became single live on the air. No, I'm just kidding. He's lovely. Okay. And so what would be the setting of this? I mean, this is dream big kind of moments, but like, how would you be connecting with her? Where would
let's say I'm connecting with her in LA in her studio.
Okay.
Post-COVID.
In IRL in her LA studio.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think part of this is also for the woo-woo people out there, it helps to have a visual of how this looks, right? Especially the aspirational thing. It's also nice if you have like a meeting coming up and then you can really see it, but I think visualization always helps. Okay. Yeah. So you have everything you need, right? You know what you're doing. You've got your bracelets, you've got the person, let's just say she answers whatnot. Okay. So you've already mentioned a little bit about what you want her to do, but let's go a little deeper in terms of like feeling based things. Like, how do you want her to feel when she's meeting you, when she's, what do you want her to know that you're suspecting she doesn't already think or know about the world?
Definitely. So something I want her to know is the uniqueness. So each bracelet is handmade and is completely unique to another one. A lot of them can be made custom made for the person in mind. So it's actually funny because whenever I make a bracelet for someone, I always ask them to tell me their story, and then I craft a bracelet for them. But that would be a little more challenging with a retail site. So I think from that perspective, I would want her to know that a lot of these buttons were collected on my travels and inspired by my travels, and really have like a global aspect to them.
Okay. Okay.
And I want her to feel inspired by my drive to help promote authenticity. That was always the whole concept behind Biddle Me This, was to make something for someone that they're really proud of, and they're proud of sharing their story and who they are.
Okay. Okay, so there's probably a lot of moments that fit this description. And you've mentioned already, so you've got a few pivotal moments you've already mentioned. So grandma, what are some other sort of pivotal moments where you yourself were inspired by this idea of jewelry representing people's stories? The value of having handmade, unique things where there's only one of its kind.
Yeah, I think in college, when one of my professors encouraged me to really start this as a full-fledged business, and then I only sold them on like Facebook. That's how I connected with people and marketed. And I would meet up with people all throughout campus that I hadn't met before, and they were very excited. They were super excited to tell me their story and then to receive a bracelet. And to the point where people would set up coffee dates with me to tell me their story, and I would like take notes. Yeah, so it'd be really fun. So those kinds of moments, like, I think people are itching to tell their story and to be heard, and to have something that represents that in a physical way.
Okay, now back to this idea of stories work best with specific moments, and there's probably 75 that you could think of. Is there one that you could choose to have fun with, where there was one story of somebody who came to you, they were itching to tell their story, they got to tell the story, you created jewelry, and I don't know, they went off to do something amazing? I mean, like, is there one story that has left a bigger impact on you than others?
Sure, that's a great question.
And it is a choice.
Yeah. So now you can see that this is me being on the spot, everyone. Well, why don't we pivot a little bit? And I was actually, a moment that comes to mind was a time on my travels in Northern Ireland. I was at Giant's Causeway, and I just went to like get out of the car, and I'm like, oh my God, I am so inspired by all the colors here. I mean, it was like beautiful blue ocean, green cliffs, and then these like beautiful like mustard color flowers kind of like all over. And right there, I was like, that's a bracelet. I'm like, these colors inspire me so much. And now I still remember that moment, right? Because it was
I'm going to stop you real quick.
Yeah.
Because you're getting ahead. So we have about 5 minutes of Alex being on the spot, and then we'll kick it over to some questions for folks. But let's just, for fun. So again, from this place of like Zen, there's multiple stories. If you get off the phone and you're like, oh my God, there was that one story that was amazing. Like, we're not worried about that. We're just going to move ahead with where we're at here, and then know that there's a bunch of stories. So why don't so getting back to this worksheet, what I've created here is some questions to help you tease the beginning, middle, and end. And if they work for you, great. They're prompts. Some people do better with just free writing a story and starting from there. So this is storyteller's choice. I will say for us, let's maybe do a little bit of hybrid. So there's no right or wrong way you could do this, but just tell us the true story of this particular moment. But let's tease it back just a little bit about maybe how you were thinking, how you were approaching your jewelry before this particular moment. And just, you have the stage, tell us the story.
Okay. Here we go. So Biddle Me This originated with a collection of buttons that were all across my grandmother's table when I was in high school. I was really fascinated by the stories and the history that they told. And so I asked her to keep them, and she said yes. And my grandpa looked at me and said, Skeeter, what are you going to do with all that junk? And in my head, I thought, challenge accepted. So then it was my duty to create something useful to do with all of these overlooked buttons. So when inspiration struck and I started creating bracelets for people, for individuals based on their stories, people just loved it. They loved having the chance to tell their story and to have someone listen and craft that uniquely for them. Now I love doing this. It's wonderful, but in terms of a business model and be able to sell that retail, it's a little more challenging. It's nice to have actual items in the shop. And so since high school, my life has been a collection of travels, and I've been able to travel the globe. And I was always itching for a way to incorporate that into my jewelry making business. And inspiration struck when I was traveling Ireland with my good friend Olivia, who's from Belgium. We were on a road trip, and I had just gotten out of the car in Northern Ireland at Giant's Causeway and was incredibly inspired by the blend of colors there. And in that moment, I thought, this is it. You know, when I feel that inspiration of the place I'm in and the story that place tells, and I can weave that into a bracelet, that's going to connect with people. It's going to connect with people who have, you know, Irish roots or northern or from Northern Ireland or traveled there before, who want to go there. Just being able to connect the people and the place together is what inspires me.
Awesome. And so if we're pretending that I'm Justina, what do you want to ask me?
I want to ask you, have you felt this way before? I mean, have you felt inspired in this way before by somewhere that you've traveled or a place that you've been?
I love that you just did that, because that was going to be one of the things I talked about, is sometimes rather than pitching somebody a thing, the most beautiful thing you can do is ask somebody a question, especially if they're an influencer and they're people love talking about themselves, and you've already experienced this with your story. I love that you went to a question instead of being like, take my bracelets, Justina. You're like sneaking them in the back door of LA. Okay, so let's give everybody virtual hands. This is so awkward in our webinar. So we're clapping for you. Everybody give her some love in the chat box. I loved that story. There was so much happening in it. I'd love to have folks in the chat box reflect on, you know, for those of you, especially who know Alex a little bit, what do you know about her as a person, as a founder, as an artist, as a maker, because of this story? I think she would love to, hey, you got a customer in Sabrina. Who would buy their bracelets? But what I love about this is, yes, there's this idea of stories and this and that, but really what came out a lot in this particular one, now of course you chose this one, you could have told us a different story about somebody else and your experience hearing their story and translating that into jewelry, but so much of you, and I know you a little bit, is you are a traveler. And I think this fusion of people and places into this very tangible thing of a bracelet, I think for those of us who've traveled a lot, and like I hate going to some kitschy, like I'd never buy something in the airport of like a little, you know, shot glass of like, I love Istanbul, you know? Yeah. Although I probably have one of those. You know, I would love to have an idea, something that really encapsulates a space, the colors, the sensory feels of it. I think that came out a lot. Other thoughts from folks, and what did you learn that was really moving for you?
Are you asking me, or are you asking me to
read the chat box people?
Okay. Yeah. People are saying that connections to people and places are important to me. So they learned that. Yeah, how about connecting people to a place? And then Ryan shared, I think the knowledge and service that Anna is providing could be useful and relevant to the virus as employees are pitching working from home to their employers. Cool. Yeah. Where have I and the company been? Where are we currently? And where we had a near and long term. So that's really insightful as well.
Yeah, and so stories are also, a huge way for people to know what, you know, what you value, what matters to you. There's a hard pitch, there's an actual thing that you do want to sell, but it's also, I think the position I'm coming from is to share a little bit of yourself along the way. And then people get to choose. Do they want to join your story? Because you're inviting them to be a part of it. And then they get to have a choice. I'm going to look at, okay, so we are at 10 till.
Yes.
I'll probably stop talking there. Questions, thoughts. I will definitely, Ryan, talk about if people want to connect with me further. Questions people have about your story that has come up during this time.
Yeah, folks are saying this has been really helpful. I'm sure there might be more questions once they work through the worksheet, you know, and now that I just went through that, I have plenty of questions, you know, it's like, what's the right direction to go in? How do you want to best connect with those folks? Here's a question. What if you're not sure about the purpose of the encounter? How do you adapt your story as to how the conversation's going?
Well, I think doing what Alex just did is asking a question. I certainly, in my meeting with the filmmaker, where I didn't have this hard pitch, I didn't have a clear sense of like, I'm this type of filmmaker and I want you to know this about me and I'd love for us to collaborate in this and that. I think questions are beautiful. You know, storytelling, we're focusing on the telling piece of it for this particular workshop, but really storytelling, the art in its most traditional form, it's very much a marrying of the teller, the story, and the audience, and all parts are equal to this exchange. So I would say, I would still challenge that there's probably a purpose. And hi, Maya. So like, for instance, Maya, you reached out to me. You probably don't have a super like, you know, you're not going to pitch me when we have our coffee date, because we do have a coffee date coming up in a couple of weeks here. You know, some of the things I heard in that was that you had connected, you remembered our exchange when we met that one time. You thought I was like, maybe cool, could be a good friend. And you asked me to hang out. Like, that could be it. You know, I think you had also mentioned, sorry to put you on the spot with a message you sent me in privacy, but I feel like that's probably a little bit where that's coming from. But sometimes we're in this space where we're like, I'm entering a creative world, I'm entering an entrepreneurial world, I'm entering a new industry. You know, sometimes you just want, the ask is like, I just want to be around the space and I want to like learn what people are doing. Like those are all valid. Ask questions, give and take. I worked for someone who once told me he teaches children to be more interested in interesting. Yeah, I like that.
It does resonate. To be more interested than interesting.
I love that.
Yeah. Asking people questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm mindful of the time now. So I want to definitely keep the questions coming. I'll share my email address. I'm going to share my screen one more time. Get to see me. Let me.
Anna, should you practice before your meeting? What does that feel like? How do you keep it authentic while still practicing? You know, like where's that balance?
Totally. Well, and I wanted to close out with a few takeaways. Takeaway number one, stories are works in progress.
Literally, I didn't read that, you guys, before I asked that.
No, it was beautiful. You couldn't have segued better. But yes, stories are always works in progress. I think, okay, everybody has their own creative process. And I do feel that this is a creative process. It is for me. I will share mine, which is, yes, I definitely do practice. Most of my stories I have told many times, and that's okay. I feel like there's a space beyond practicing where when you have like the first round, you tell the story, it's a little bit uncomfortable, you practice. I think the more comfortable you get with a story, I think the more you're able then to drop back into yourself, because then you're comfortable with the content. Now, of course, I have a background in theater, so like that could be my process. Everybody has others. I definitely discourage scripts, but I think bullet points, and test and change. So what I mean by that is, you know, go out there and practice telling your story to friends, to people, to whomever in lower stakes environment, and then take note of what parts of the story feel good to say. Because the parts that feel good, you're not going to have to memorize because they're going to naturally come out. Like you came alive when you started talking about those colors. Was it in Ireland or Iceland? No, Ireland. For some reason I was thinking, right, these moments, like, I think that's where I was saying, go back to these moments that really changed you, because the moments that changed you, you're not going to forget them. You don't need a script to remember that moment, right? You need a script when you're making stuff up, right?
Yeah.
Or you're putting together this like TED Talk of bullet points that are all over the place. If you're telling the story of something that matters to you, you might tell it differently. But, give yourself permission to change. Watch people's eyes and connections and their body language, like see where things are clicking and resonating, and go, okay, that felt good to say. It seemed to really make the point at that point. Have fun with it. So definitely practice. The other thing too, and this gets back to the script piece of it, is I believe that self-awareness is the number one story hack, story trick that you can have. So I'm not ever that concerned about this like perfect script of like, here's the beginning, here's the middle. I've created worksheets because people want them, and that helps you to have those prompts to help you get over zero. But really, I truly believe that the more you are connected to your story, connected to the experiences that you have lived through, and understand how they have changed you into who you are today, that's almost like an energetic shift that people feel when they're around you. So even if your words are wonky, they're going to feel like, okay, I don't really know where she's going with this. Like, is it a, business? Is it an Etsy shop? Like, But it, like, you looked like you were having so much fun. Like, you made me want to travel when you were talking about this jewelry. You made me want to like actually dig up the jewelry that I've purchased on vacation and like wear them around the house, right? It felt good to see your eyes sparkle to tell that story, even if you were sort of on the spot going, and I'm interrogating you live in front of people. And this gets into the sort of the life coachy part of storytelling, is that the takeaways can change because your story is a choice. What I mean by that is that the third act of your story, the like who you are today because of this moment, it can change over time, right? We can have these moments that we attach a certain meaning to it, like, I don't know, I almost want to say something personal, like, oh, that was, the guy who taught me that men can't be trusted or whatever. Like, you attach that meaning. And then over time, you're like, okay, well, actually, I've seen these things. Now it's like, well, he was the person who taught me that I, show up in a particular way or whatever. This is a weird personal question, example, but we look at our stories differently. They mean different things over time. And I just say that to remember that you have the choice to decide what the meaning is that you make of these stories, right? And you can also decide that meaning no longer serves you and attach a different meaning. And that's why I say it's a little life coaching, because a life coach would always be telling you to detach from all the meaning that you make of your things. But I would say it's more of a choice, and like, let that be empowering, that you get to choose the ending to your stories, right? Because you're constantly choosing, or you're moving away from this moment. Hopefully that made sense. So I'm going to check the chat box real quick. Here is my email, website, and Instagram, if that's your jam. I will say on the worksheet, I'll repeat, if you do the worksheet, you have questions, you want to send me a draft, I truly mean it, for anybody who's attended this workshop, please do send that to me. I'll give you some thoughts, some feedback, some ways to go deeper with it. Or just like drop in and tell me your story.
We actually do have a question on one that came up, and we just have about a minute left. So for those that can stay, please do. But this question is in regards to job interviews. Yep. What do you recommend for job-specific interviews, especially within the government sector?
So job interviews are a little bit of a different beast, because you do need to craft a story in a way that is like, it's part truth, but part you're trying to say the right thing to get the job. I still maintain that I actually have a link, a YouTube video I created for job interviews for whoever who asked that question. I'm guessing it's Ryan. If it's a government thing, send me an email. I'll drop you a YouTube. But I would say, structure your story in a way that, even though it's a little bit of a lie, that the experience that you've had kind of like naturally links up to this particular job as being like the culmination of the experience of the, how do I say, like this is the impact you want to be making, and that this job is the fulfillment of your purpose. So I would just say, dig into your, whatever backstory is relevant to that particular job as being a way that you feel that you will be personally fulfilled by that. It would be a lot more helpful if I knew the actual job and the actual struggle you're having with that particular job, because there's a part of me that wants to say, every time somebody's struggling with a job interview, I always want to be like, are you sure you want this job? So whoever that was, please do send me an email, and then I can kind of walk you back through that particular thing. Yeah, and for anybody who's already opening the worksheets, I will go ahead and give you access as soon as this call is over.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, I think that was, I mean, just all of the comments, everyone just absolutely loved this. And it was a delight. It was such a delight to have you, Anna. I mean, this was really fun. And it was fun for me to like talk about my story too. This was great. I loved the interaction here. So it was wonderful. And I think that people will be reaching out to you. And yeah, I'm super excited for everyone to get this worksheet and take some time today, tomorrow, next week, whenever, and think about that next important meeting or opportunity to tell your story, and what really matters in it, which is awesome. So, and thank you all for listening to me share part of my story with you all.
I think people want them bracelets, girl. Get on it.
Yeah, I guess you gotta get on it now. So wonderful. Well, Anna, thank you so much. This was wonderful. Really, we can't thank you enough for being here today and giving this presentation. So thank you. And to everyone out there, we'll see you in a few weeks, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Happy storytelling.
All righty. Bye, everyone. Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.